that, to begin, I'd like to turn things over to Charlie, Cam, and Don, who will each make individual statements.
Good morning, and thank you. First and foremost, before we get started, I'd like to thank our fan base for your loyalty and dedication. I'm obviously quite biased, but I happen to think that Boston has the most passionate and loyal fans in all of the National Hockey League. We owe you a better team, and we aim to deliver a better team. I share your disappointment and, frankly, embarrassment on how poorly things played out over the course of this season, and I cannot thank you enough for your continued support. We embrace your criticism because it's well-deserved, and I want you to know it fuels myself and it fuels the two gentlemen to my left to do better, which we will. And speaking of Cam and Don, I'm proud to sit alongside these two gentlemen because I know we've got the right people in the right seats on the bus to bring this franchise back to glory. Now let me be clear, the results from last season are absolutely unacceptable and accountability has never been higher. However, I need to tell you that when deciding what is best for the long-term success of this franchise, we have to be pragmatic and use data-driven decisions. Now, Cam and Don, in their respective roles as president and general manager, have proven that they can take a franchise that has missed the playoffs and build one for sustained success. It is my opinion that we can do it again, and this time get over the hump and become a Stanley Cup champion. I don't think it's an accident that the Bruins are tied for the best winning percentage in the National Hockey League since Don Sweeney's hiring. We've made the postseasons 8 years in a row prior to this spring, and we've made a lot of historic achievements along this journey. I also applaud Don, as I find that he's an industry leader. And specifically, I'm referring to general manager for the Four Nations tournament we just hosted this past spring here in Boston, but also being appointed the AGM for Canada's Olympic team next winter. But today is a time to look forward, to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and I believe strongly that we can bring a Stanley Cup back here to Boston. I feel we're in a great position to do so, and I invite our incredible and loyal fans to come along with the ride with us, because together we can do this.
I echo Charlie's remarks about our fans. I mean, I go to every other building in the league, and to see the passion, the loyalty, the commitment to our franchise is at the tops of the league, in my opinion. This year was very frustrating for all of us, especially our fans. We have high expectations, and we didn't meet them this year. We fell way short, and you know, it's disappointing for us sitting up here. It's disappointing for our fan base. They deserve better. They've supported us for 100+ years. This gives us an opportunity to regroup a little bit, reset, and build back better. That's what I'm thinking we're going to do. That's what I entrust Don to do. Don has been a great GM in this league. Has everything gone right? No, it doesn't. That's just sports. But there's been more good than bad. Don and his group, in my opinion, have earned the right to get us back to where we all want to be. Don?
I want to thank Cam and Charlie first and foremost for instilling confidence in our group, me as the general manager. As Charlie referenced, we've had a lot of success regular season. We've gotten to the pinnacle one time in 2019, and we have to I have to accept the responsibility that this team significantly underperformed, and the frustration that the fan base has. the unique position that Cam and I both have as a player, knowing what this city craves in its hockey team, and we need to deliver that. I think we've done a good job over the course of my tenure as general manager to try and aspire to put the most competitive team we can possibly put together each and every year. We have not hit a reset in quite some time, and pragmatically we chose that decision at this year's deadline to start to deepen a prospect pool, to look forward to what we have to do to hit the reset, to reestablish a core group, and to get us back to the competitive level that this organization deserves, the city deserves, and our fan base deserves. And again, we're going to we've already put a plan in place. We started it at the deadline to reestablish the leadership group that'll be necessary, and to surround them with the most competitive, driven players that we can possibly put together, and that'll include a coaching search.
Thank you, guys. Now we'll begin our Q&A portion. Again, Hannah over there, Pat over there, 2 wireless mics. When it is your turn to ask a question, ask that you introduce yourself and your outlet and who your question is for. Steve, why don't you kick us off?
Steve Conroy, Boston Herald. Don, with the holes that you have in the lineup, and I realize you do have some pieces that most rebuilding teams don't have, but with the holes that you have, how long do you think it will take to build a sustained contender, as Charlie had mentioned?
Well, we have to get back to full health in key positions that, certainly we missed Hampus for a significant portion of the year and Charlie for a significant portion of the year. It probably starts there in the health of our group. We have to find, either through the development of our current players, some extra scoring potential, and we have to probably address the wing positions that will deepen, the scoring ability that showed up ineffectively this year, the way the roster was built. We didn't score enough. We put a lot of pressure because our power play was dormant for most of the season. And when we didn't defend with the structure and conviction that we have in years past and did when Joe first took over and did a really good job, we went from being a middle of the ground defending team to arguably one of the best defending teams in the league as to what the expected data would tell us. And then in January 3rd, we have a real pivot point that we all of a sudden did not. And that's the problem that started to creep in, where you start to have scoring deficiencies in players that certainly weren't, relative to the year before, hitting their watermarks. Obviously David and Morgan had terrific offensive years, and so we need to be able to complement that in a much better fashion. But I think the scoring potential of our group needs to be increased and addressed this summer, but we need to get back to the competitive level, the speed, and defending with the conviction that we have been doing.
Adam Pellerin Nesson, what's the status in the search for a new head coach, and is Joe still in the mix for that?
So I spoke with Joe at length. Obviously, we met with our coaches in a debrief, and I've spoken at length with Joe. He's aware that we're going to have a coaching search. He's aware that he'll be part of the final group of coaches that we get down to, because I think he's earned and deserved that. Joe, when he took over the 20 games, did a really, really good job. And as I referenced, because I've gone back and looked at the record of our team and where things went sideways with us, we couldn't get back on the rails. On January 3rd, we were at 20-15-4, had gotten back to a .565 winning, point percentage-wise, and then we went 9-12-4 in the next 25 games, and that's not good enough. Our schedule was arguably a little harder at that point in time, but it's still not good enough. And we need to address, obviously, get our goaltenders back to where they're pushing each other, and defending in front of them much better, and that will be part of the coaching search. So we've already started that process and knowing who's available, and narrowing that down as I go through some checkpoints in terms of hitting the criteria. Communication with players nowadays is paramount. Structure, detail, being organized is paramount. You can't have it and survive. I want a coach that's going to evolve a little bit offensively, and again, that's part and parcel with being able to communicate with sometimes younger players and their stubbornness or their inexperience. We went through some of that this year where players were below their watermarks and they couldn't get back away from it. For a period of time in the 20 games, they defended with a conviction, but then they got away from it. So we have to have that detail. We have to get our power play back on course. This is a year where both specialty teams were significantly underperforming. Goaltending was part of that. Our goaltenders weren't very good on the penalty kill side of things, as the stats would show us. But again, that might be the breakdowns in front of them from a penalty kill standpoint. And driving internal competitiveness is something we have to get back to. And a coach has to be an extension of that. So we are going to address those things through the coaching search, and we're not going to lower the expectations. You know, we have to get back into being that competitive group. To answer Steve honestly, to say, I think we're back in the mix with the group of guys if we stay healthy and we do our jobs this summer.
Don, Matt Votor from MassLab. Are you comfortable in this, as you're going through the coaching search, are you looking for somebody that can be successful similarly style-wise to what has been successful for you guys over a long period of time? Or right now, are you open to kind of different things style-wise in terms of the way this team plays going forward as you rebuild the roster?
Well, I've had the good fortune of working with three, and counting Joe, 4 different coaches from what they value. And I do believe the league you need to continue to evolve. That's why I referenced that, evolve offensively, especially with younger players and integrating them. But if you don't defend in the National Hockey League, you don't have sustained success. However you want to do it, whether that's zone, man-to-man, whether that's a hybrid, whether that's, neutral zone, whether that's, you look at LA's situation this year going from, 1-3-1 to a little bit more of a pressure situation that they're doing, but they still do a really good job. They led the league in goals against. That's part of winning hockey. It just has to be, and it's going to be part of our fabric. We're going to get back to that. Now, we have to continue to evolve offensively, as I referenced the scoring deficiencies that we had this year, and our power play in particular put a lot of pressure on our team that you have to be perfect. Our goaltenders previously have been really, really good. This year, they weren't as good as what they had been. That's fact. And our team in front of them didn't defend with the same level of conviction. So the structure has to be there. It has to be part of the fabric of what a coach believes in. But I do understand that the players coming into the league are offensively driven. And they need to understand that it's okay to play with that offensive creativity, but it has to be within the confines of what your team and the structure is going to dictate in order to be successful.
Hi, Tara Sullivan from the Boston Globe. In regards to the coaching search, if maybe each of you would just sort of let us know any nuts and bolts you're willing to share as to your individual roles in the search. And my question about it is sort of twofold. Like, one, when you're in those conversations, is the perception of the job from the outside as a rebuild, a teardown, or do you feel like coaches that you're meeting with or prospective coaches see this as almost win now or closer to win now? And I am curious if there's been any questioning of you based on dismissing 3 coaches in your tenure, any pushback about getting enough time to do the job?
From the coaches themselves?
Yeah.
I'll call you up and let you know, Tara, if somebody turns it down the invitation to interview for one of the most historic jobs in the National Hockey League. I understand.
Have that conversation.
I've gone through one coaching search in my tenure during the time here. As I said, I had the privilege of be working with Claude. I turned Bruce from an interim into a head coach, didn't go through a search. So the previous time we went through a search, and it was extensive. And we came down with several coaches that we chose a really good coach. We went on to have a really good year. The way we described that, and Cam was part of the process, other people were also part of the process and will continue to be part of the process. Charlie was part of the process at the end to understand, the personality and what this coach wanted to sign up for. So in part of the exercise in going forward, every coach that comes through the door will be looking forward to working for the Boston Bruins. We have a 100-year history. We have an incredible amount of success. That's going to drive the bus. Don Sweeney interviewing the person is not driving the bus. I'm entrusted to make every decision possible in the best interest of the organization, and I'm never going to stop doing that. The deadline was a perfect example of what was painful personally and professionally, but almost every general manager goes through it at some point in time. And I don't want to go through it again. I want to build exactly the way we had been doing, and I want a coach to be part of that. They will be entrusted to understand organizationally, they have the full support when we make a decision that they'll be in place. and with the expectations that we are going to be a highly competitive team again, with the expectations to win, whether that's next year, the following year, or the year after, it's going to remain in place. So this is not, we took a step back at the deadline, and now we're going to take our steps forward, and a coach is going to understand that, and he's going to love being part of the Boston Bruins organization, regardless of whether or not he's working with Don Sweeney.
Scott McLaughlin, WEI. For Charlie, is there a mandate from your end that this team is back in the playoffs next year? And is there any appetite for this to potentially take longer than that to build back?
I would defer to by the way, we've had this conversation. Are the playoffs in the discussion for next year? And the response that I got from both Cam and Don was absolutely. We feel like we have a team that's we've already addressed this, that we have a team that we feel, and again, everyone needs to stay healthy, we can make the playoffs absolutely, and make a push.
The biggest thing for me is I don't want everybody just focus on making the playoffs. Yes, we do want to make the playoffs, but we have bigger goals in mind than just making the playoffs. It's not just about getting in and getting bounced in round one. You know, we're here to understand that we have to build a team that's going to compete for Stanley Cups. I mean, Don and his group have done it before. I have full confidence we can do it again. You know, the game is so fickle. We win in 2019 in Game 7 at home here. I don't know what the conversations are externally after that, but you know, I think it's not just about getting into the playoffs here. It's about winning.
I'll follow up just quickly, because back in 2007, we charted a course as an organization that we were going to build a team that was going to have sustained success. In 2016, we did the exact same thing in similar fashion and got right back to the doorstep. We've been highly competitive. We just haven't gotten across the finish line. And would I like to have won in 13 and 19? Absolutely. There's no question that's what drives us. The goal is not just to be a playoff team. That's never been the goal. That's never been the mandate. That's never been the goal. It's been an expectation that you're a playoff team in order to win and achieve the ultimate goal, and that's what we're going to try and do.
To follow up on some of the coaching search questions, I have a few here. So have you started the process yet besides Joe? As well as, would you be open to a candidate that has no NHL experience, someone from, say, college or the AHL, as part of your coaching search?
I have started it. I've started the background part of criteria, as I referenced, speaking with people that I know will be available, that are currently available, that would be interested. Starting again back to the criteria. Does it have to include NHL experience on a head coaching level? No. It has to include some form of, it should include some form of NHL exposure. But if somebody blows you away, they blow you away. I don't think I'm going to narrow it down to just, I think that's a disjustice to the process. So I'm going to take the process and identify, as I said, the criteria that we have in place and go through it. Similar to last time and similar to where we got down to, 3 candidates in the situation that they've all been head coaches in the National Hockey League. So you feel good about that and they've had success. The person who comes into this door is going to have success. We're going to set them up for that. We're going to work with them with that. And but having NHL experience is part of that. They don't have to be currently an NHL coach, but exposure to the league is important.
Fluto Shinzawa, The Athletic. Don, 2 questions. First of all, to when you're ready to add here, whether it's scoring on the wings, defense, whatever, what do you think is the primary mechanism through which you'll add? Free agency, trade, internal?
It's all the above. Whatever is at our disposal to utilize, be it through trade, as I referenced what we tried to do at the deadline to find some younger players, deepen the prospect pool, add a player that, that would help us in Casey from an offensive standpoint. He's a different player than Charlie, backfilled with a player that may be able to do some of the things and grow into some of the things that Charlie Coyle was so very good at. We're going to use every mechanism possible.
And then with younger players in years past, they've been pretty NHL ready before you've brought them into the fold. Does that standard change in terms of incorporating prospects who might not be as ready as they have been in the past?
I mean, deep down, I think you'd always want a finished product when you arrive on an NHL ice. You know, we used Matty Poitras a couple years ago that was very, very good and arguably one of our better players in training camp. He earned an opportunity to be here. You know, could we have made a short-term decision and a long-term benefit of sending him back to junior after 9 games? Yeah, probably. In hindsight, did it help him from the standpoint of getting exposure and get him further along in the process? I think he's a better player now as a result of some of the experiences he's had. Unfortunately, he got injured last year and missed a lion's share of the second half of the season. He's now back on track offensively, producing at the AHL level at over point a game. He's going to go through the playoffs, which we're excited about with the group we have as a next building block step. And arguably, he comes back as a better player and challenging to the degree that you just referenced. We're not going to just plug a player in because he's young and exciting. They have to earn those stripes. You know, Fabian's a good example of building blocks and recognizing one-on-one talent and ability is different than, you know, how it's going to translate to winning hockey in the National Hockey League on a competitive team. Ultimately, they have to earn that, and we're going to hold them to that standard.
Mick Colagio, Rink Rap blog, 3 times fast. Donnie, is there any chance you'll hold on to a significant amount of your cap space if you think that the better investment can be made in 2026?
I mean, you know, if you look at the free agent class, if that's what you're referencing, you know, we're going to go through negotiations with Morgan Geekie. We're currently going through them to extend him. What portion of the salary cap and how we approach
Yeah,
things?
the UFA. You know, like if you decide, well, what do we need? And then you decide you identify what we need, and then you look at the market and you say, boy, I don't want to commit all of our cap space to what the best we can do to become more relevant next season if it's going to tie our hands against the players that are going to come up in 26 that we think can get us where we really want to go.
Well, I think we're going to try and pursue the right players. If they don't exist or they don't want to join us, then that's a different story. But the hypothetical of eyeballing a player that may come to fruition in 26, you know, could be short-sighted. You know, ultimately, if that player really wants to join you, I think you can do everything in your power to make the space available. That's my honest belief. I think you can move a player, you can create enough space. If that player that is a great player in the National Hockey League can help you, I think every team finds the space necessary.
So from a realistic standpoint, you don't see a scenario whereby you do the best you can to get the Bruins back on the playoff map and then not be able to get a player that would really
I don't think we'll box ourselves out.
Yeah.
At all.
Okay.
I think we're driven to get ourselves right back on track. I don't think we need to pursue things that aren't going to fall into that category for us and set ourselves up for disappointment as a result of that. But my belief is if we put ourselves in position to be competitive again, we're going to be more attractive to the player you just described, and we're going to do everything necessary if that player wants to join us to make it happen.
Quick specific follow. Where do things stand with Henry Yoki? How are you?
Along with all of our UFAs, we're going through some internal discussions this week and next, and then I'll attack, you know, the players that we think will be part of the process going forward, indicating to their representatives that we were going to take some time associated with whether it's Henry, whether it's Cole, and going through the list of those players. RFA will also be part of that. You know, we have a little longer timeline potentially to be able to utilize that we will, and I reference Morgan because, you know, it's obvious that we have a interest in getting in front of that because that sometimes sets up what other things we may or may not be able to do, and we'd like to sign him to a longer-term deal. We know he's going to be on our team next year regardless, but we'd prefer to have him on a longer-term deal. He had a hell of a year.
you referenced the goaltending earlier. To what do you attribute the drop-off in Swayman's game, and are you concerned at all that the added workload was part of it?
Well, in my exit meeting, Jeremy categorically denied that the extra workload was part of it. In some ways, it also led Corpusalo to say he didn't play enough and would like to have a little more of that lion's share. And that's part of the internal competition that I think we have to get back to, and being able to push for playing time, for opportunity. There were opportunities in the course of the year where Corpy was playing really well and probably deserved the net. There were other times where our group felt that to get Sway back on track, to put him in situations and leverage situations that arguably he should be playing and playing at his best hockey. And if we were going to be successful, that we would like him to do that. We clearly would like him to get back to the level that he's more than capable of getting to. That's part of the reset. And it was a disjointed year for him and an extension of our team. He's not to blame as the extension of our team. He's just part of it. But again, leaning on Corpy and creating internal competition that says it's not just a de facto that you get the start. It certainly wasn't previously to that, and it worked. Both those guys pushed each other, and I want that back again.
Jimmy Golan from the Associated Press. Charlie, all those wins that you referred to under Don's tenure, that same thing could also be said of a couple of coaches who are currently in the playoffs with other teams. Why were they held accountable in one way when these two are being held accountable in a different way?
Well, I just want to make, there's been a narrative that I think we should address. And I believe there have been 3 head coaches of the Boston Bruins over the past, I'm going to say 10, or it's more like 15 years when you count Claude. Sweeney's just mentioned, we hired Bruce Cassidy for Providence, and he coached down there and then came up and coached us at the Boston Bruins for some time. I think the shelf life of a head coach is significantly shorter than one of a general manager or a team president. It's the nature of the beast of the job. You can have players' attention for a select window of time, and then unfortunately, sometimes you lose it. It's Don's job to make sure that he's got his hand on the pulse of whether or not the players have tuned him out, the head coach. And I feel he's done a pretty good job of measuring that.
So can I follow up just for a little context? Joe's been here a long time and actually been under all 3 of those coaches. I worked with Bruce for 8 years in Providence before he took over the reins. Was part of Claude's tenure here for the whole time. I'm wired to be working with people for solutions and not looking for a quick fix. Bruce grew into a really good head coach in National Hockey. He remains a really good head coach in National Hockey. I just worked with him at the Four Nations, and we just won that together. And we offered Monty a contract extension. Couldn't find a landing ground. He did a hell of a job in St. Louis this year. He's a good hockey coach. He led us to an historic season. Sometimes, things go askew, and you have to reevaluate and reassess. But generally, my tenure has been to work with people through solution-based, and sometimes you make hard decisions. That's part of the job, and ultimately, that same hard decision will be made whether or not I'm still doing the job here. To be perfectly honest with you, so that's all part of it. That's professional sports. I was on the same side as a player and understanding when that shelf life existed. Fortunate enough to go to another organization during that period of time, which I never envisioned. But my goal is to work with people and find solutions, and that's what we're going to do with the next head coach.
Kevin DuPont, Boston Globe. I've got a question for each of you, a different question if I could. I'll start with you, Charlie. You mentioned how tough this year was, an embarrassment to use your word. Would you consider rescinding the 4% price increase for the season ticket holders?
Well,
on top of the 9% last year.
I see. ticket pricing is a sensitive subject. I'm aware of that. Things cost more. The way our structure of the U.S. economy is based is things cost more. I expect that you probably pay your higher electric bill than you did last year. I know that we, for instance, pay more to open our building for security, for ushers, for concession workers, for parking attendants, everything. People deserve a raise and an increase. Likewise, we increase our ticket prices as our expenses go. I've mentioned this before. Every dollar we bring in, 50% goes to the players. We share it. We're in a partnership together with them. So the ticket increase, the price, whether it's 4% or 9%, is all going back into the hockey club. So we've made our decision. We've raised our ticket prices, and no, we will not be rescinding that.
Okay, Cam, question on drafting and development. Neither of them have really been up to expectations, in my opinion.
So can you just elaborate on that, Kevin?
The drafting?
Yeah.
Well,
where we've picked and who we've picked and how it's turned out.
Well, where you've picked is not a lot of top 10 picks, but ultimately,
not a lot of first-round picks.
Yeah, but ultimately, are those draft picks? Have they developed? Have they come in? Have they come online the way you want them? If that's the case, fine. But
well, obviously, you know, you wanted to hit on all your picks. There's no question. I mean, the work that the scouts do throughout the course of a year, you know, they put in a lot of time and effort. They understand the players as best they can. We get the information from the scouts. Don ultimately ends up making the picks with the information that he gets from the scouts throughout the year. But I think that our drafting and developing, the narrative there is a little off. And it's been going on for quite some time. Goes back to 15. And 15, it was really unfair to Don. By the time Don got hired, it was late May. Draft was late June. He wasn't even probably thinking about being a general manager of the Boston Bruins at the time. What Don did leading up to the draft to make the acquisitions that he did with those picks, to get the 3 picks, I thought was really good. Then Don was trying to move up in the draft. It didn't work out. What we should have done, looking back, we should have taken some time out and said, okay, guys, let's regroup here. We didn't move up. We got 3 picks in a row. I think it was very new for everybody. We stood backstage for those 3 picks. What we should have done was get back to our table and say, okay, let's sit down and say, are we okay with our list? And, you know, look, these are things you try to learn from. Other picks throughout, after that, I think we've got a number of players, not necessarily playing with the Boston Bruins, but a number of players that we have drafted that have played NHL hockey games. We have traded those picks. We have traded some of the prospects to try and improve our club to win the Stanley Cups. So the narrative that we're not hitting on all our draft picks. No one is. You pick in the top 10, you better hit. We haven't done that in quite some time. So have we been perfect? No. Can we be better? Yes.
I don't think anybody's asking to be perfect. I'm asking going forward here, because that's 10 years ago. The 10 subsequent years, are you satisfied with the draft picks and the development of those picks 10 years later?
Not with everyone, no. No, I mean, you know, it's when you're picking and looking at 17-year-old kids, you're hoping they're going to be NHL players by the time they're 23, 24 at the latest. It takes some time for these kids to develop, and some develop at different ages, some don't develop at all. But we can be better, Kevin. There's no question we can be better, but it's not as bad as everybody thinks.
Okay, and last one, Don, thank you, first of all. Return on investment specifically of Zadorov and Elias Lindholm, vastly below what many of us expected. I'd like to get your interpretation of the return on investment of those 2 players, and specifically whether there's something coming that would lead you to believe their performance is going to be better than what we saw this year. Thank you.
Well, I'll take it in conjunction with where our team performed. I can address each player individually. Elias got out of the gate slowly with an injury, as did several of our players. Didn't develop the chemistry early on that we had hoped with David. Late in the season, went back to play with him, played very, very well there. So that's the hope that a player that can take a lion's share of harder matchups, but still can produce. Is he below the levels we would like him to be offensively? He lost confidence in his shooting, in the bumper, and our power play was not very effective during the course of the season. So all players go through that adjustment coming to a new city. There's a bunch of things that those aren't excuses. He didn't offer one single excuse. He didn't use the injury as an excuse. He still had, a reasonable offensive year. It's not what we had hoped, what we expect, and we expect it to be higher. He actually had more points than he had the previous year, but again, that's not what we'd hoped for. In Nikita's case, came in and was very rambunctious to start the year and took a lot of penalties as a result of it, put himself behind the 8 ball. If you look at him statistically, he, had his point totals, again, the raw statistics, we don't really look at plus minus all that much, from the standpoint of performance, but it is an indicator of, when good things are happening on the ice versus bad things are happening on the ice. And, he led our team in a significant margin there. So and he stood up for a lot of players. There was a lot of opportunities during the course of the year where other teams, trying to exert their will, and they had a tough time because he'd go right by their bench, he'd go right by our bench. And, I've read enough of your work over the years that I think you appreciate that. So I don't think it should be lost on any of us that he brought some of that to the table and will continue to bring some of that to the table. Could he get better? Absolutely. Do we expect both of them to get better and impact our team? Absolutely. ROI for it? Yeah, it's got to go up. Ultimately, when you integrate those guys in there, you want immediate impact, for certain. But they started to grow into their roles and understanding of how they're going to impact our team going forward, and we need to do a better job surrounding them. In Zadorov's case, he played with every different partner known to man this year that we put on the roster, and it didn't help him. It didn't help settle his game down at times, certainly, and we missed Hampus in a lot of ways. And hopefully a healthy start to the season, a great off season, a conditioning phase that, in Elias's case, he's going to the World Championships, will be healthy when he comes back, has a really good summer, and gets off to a much better start for us. In both cases, as I referenced earlier, the conditioning and the way training camp went, I'm not particularly happy with, so we're going to address it.
Gail Triani with Nesson. Don, this question's for you. Going back to the trade deadline, moving on from Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle, what type of players do you think are either in the organization that can fill their roles, especially on the PK, or are you going to look outside to try and fill those roles?
Well, it's going to be a combination of both. You saw players step into the vacancies of those situations and at times do a pretty good job and other times struggle. Those are unique qualities that players grow into. They're not ready-made. Brandon, in his case, is an elite penalty killer in the National Hockey League, and Charlie Coyle is as well. And that's why their teams are going to have success in the playoffs. If they're slotted appropriately on our team, we have success, which we have had. So the next players have to go in and go through some of those learning curve experiences. Fraser Minton's a left-hand shot, goes in, he's taking draws on the left side. That's different from Charlie. So we have to have players grow and assume those responsibilities. That's what, obviously Prov is entering the playoffs tonight. We're going to see how they respond to those and see whether or not they can grow and graduate, for lack of a better term, graduate to be able to do it in the National Hockey League. And if not, we'll have to address it from the outside and probably bring in a little bit more experience, as I referenced on the wing, to spread the scoring ability around. We lost quality people and quality players, and that's what made it so professionally and personally painful at the deadline, because they've been successful. They're going to continue to be successful, and it's opportunity for somebody else to come in, as you referenced, to take over those minutes.
I have one question for Don and one for Cam, if I could. Don, you've referenced not getting an extension done with Jim Montgomery, and you referenced the training camp. In retrospect, do you regret not having more of an answer or making a decision last off season in terms of Jim Montgomery's future with the team?
I don't have a regret from the standpoint of not being able to complete a deal. It takes two people to complete a deal, and I would use that on a cast or wider net. We had several players that dug their heels in situations, and I'm not going to begrudge anybody. If they feel that the marketplace is going to bear more fruit for them, then they should pursue what they feel is best for in their best interest. I have to make decisions for the organization to put the jigsaw puzzle together in the best interest of our team. And sometimes you have to bend, and I recognize that. There's plenty of times where I have. And there's other times where I'm trying to look at the longer projection of things and not bending. And sometimes you get, a stalemate as a result of it. You hope you don't, because you enter into negotiations trying to find a deal, not hoping not to. In every one of those, we offered contracts to every single person. Unfortunately, it didn't come to bear on several of them, and we made decisions as a result of that. There are two sides to that street in the negotiation part of the process.
And then Cam, different position, but there was a report that Don is entering the final year of his contract. A, can you confirm that? And B, is there a
That's not a report. I said it earlier.
Okay. Okay, fair enough.
You want to validate it? You can validate it. It doesn't have any bearing on, again, as I referenced, not to jump in front of Cam and finish the question, it's not going to have any bearing on the decisions. The same questions come up in the deadline. It's irrelevant from the standpoint of the job that I'm going to try and do for the organization. They both know that.
Cam, is there any desire to get an extension done, or could you go through next season with that one?
Given a lot of thought, I'm still contemplating what the best course of action is, but as I mentioned, I really feel like Don has done a good job here for the most part. Him and his staff have been very collaborative. I like when I sit in their meetings how collaborative they are. Obviously, the year that we had is a huge disappointment, and that falls on all of us, not just Don. That falls on all of us. I'll figure that out in the near future with that particular question, whether we're going to re-sign Don or not. But he's got another year left.
Bridget Prude, WEI, both these are for Don.
Again, it takes two to tango.
So the first one, just to follow up on what you said about Morgan Geeky's contract, is there a term length that you're targeting with him, and how confident are you that you're going to get to that deal?
I will reserve those conversations with my internal group, and obviously if Morgan or his representatives decide to publicize that, then that's perfectly fine with them. They have a goal, we have a goal. I'm not boxed into any one particular year. We're going to look at the entire whether that's term and AAV and all the other things that go with it, and find the landing spot. Our goal is to have a long-term deal.
And second question, you mentioned Swayman's workload and wanting to have more of a competition with Corpusalo. Is there a difference in approach in how much of a workload you're going to give both of the guys next season?
Well, we're going to go with what we've always done, in terms of who has the hot hand, who can win, without losing sight of a person needs to have reps and needs to have game opportunities. And at times this year, there were a couple opportunities that I've discussed with Bob and Joe that we probably missed an opportunity to allow Corpy to have a little bit of that rope, in particular when he was playing well. That's sometimes the decisions that, as Bob would say, the goalie excellence department, the goalie not as excellent department this year, and he's been on record as saying that.
Anyone else? Steve, and then Kevin.
Don, just on the coaching search, do you have a timeline on that? And do you think it'd be necessary to have a coach in place when free agency starts so free agents know what they're getting into?
Probably in a perfect world. Timing might be that the coaches that we identify are still part of the NHL playoffs, and when you'd get permission, when's the appropriate time to get permission and opportunity, could present some challenges. I'll be forward-thinking and communicating with that with certain people, but very respectful of their situations and what they're trying to accomplish. I don't have a definitive timeline, but my hope would be we'd be far along at that point in time.
Don,
We there? Oh, we are. Don, some years you've had a laundry list of guys headed for surgeries. I just want to get an update if that's the case this year on anybody. And also, what is your confidence on Hampus in terms of his, ready to go from the gate? There's been a lot of talk, a lot of rumors about his knee being sort of in the Kevin Miller category.
We're fortunate that outside of Pavel Zacha having a small procedure, not surgical, recently, and he's not going to go to the World Championships. Everybody right now, Johnny Beecher, I suspect may have something, small to repair. Everybody else right now is not a surgical candidate. We have several players that are going to attend the men's worlds. Elias is going, David Pasternak is going, Jacob Lauko is going, Andrew Peak is going, Mason Lorai is going, and Jeremy Swayman are going. So again, they're playing more hockey, so I don't have an update on that front. As relates to Hampus, the scourging part of where we're going through the season, and again, part of my job is to try to be proactive. If we knew we were missing Hampus for the entire season, we would have had to be aggressive to bring in another player. The timeline was generally about 2 months plus. And when it turned into 3 and then shut down, obviously that was disheartening for our group. And the same time Charlie went down. There is no indications based on the second small procedure to remove a screw that was irritating him and not part of the healing process at that point in time, which ended up shutting him down to allow it to be a natural process. There's no indications that he'll be restricted in any way, shape, or form and not back to the level of full health and impact for our hockey club, which is a big boost for us. He'll have a full off season of training, and return to play status should be 100% when September rolls around.
Yeah. Charlie, if I could just return to the question Steve sort of opened with, how long you guys foresee perhaps this reset and build back better. Do you have thoughts in mind? Could you withstand another year without the playoffs? You've been very clear it's a Stanley Cup team. If you saw other things, what do you feel about that?
If Cam and Don came to me and said, listen, we do think we have a path towards a championship team, but we need patience, of course, we can be patient. I do feel, though, and we've spoken at great length about this, the team that we currently have, healthy, with the additions we intend to make this summer, I anticipate that we'll have a playoff team and play meaningful hockey at this time of year in 2026.
Take one more from Matt.
One sort of clerical and then one larger picture. For the restricted free agents that you have, do you expect have you made decisions on whether you plan to tender each of them to bring them back?
No, we have a little more time to make our decisions there. I've been in touch with all the representatives and where they do stand at this point in time. I can't be definitive that we'll be doing that with everybody, but we're going to take the time necessary to make the final decisions.
And the bigger one is, were there parts of your GM experience for Four Nations where you were looking at players and are spending more time looking at maybe other teams that were valuable for both the upcoming free agency and for any coaching search that you're doing for things that you were able to observe from being around that?
Well, I mean, you can live in dreamland, and the center who scored the winning goal is a pretty good player. So, just speaking hypothetically with around the league and not identifying that player, we had a chance to see some terrific hockey. We had a chance as a staff, and we continue to do this, to be evaluating like elite players and evaluating players that are on the doorstep of becoming either a Four Nations player, representing Canada, going to the World Championships. It's been a very, very good process for me to be talking with the other, accomplished general managers in the National Hockey League that and how they're seeing and how they're building their teams and how we want to build our team. And it still comes back. And working with the coaches, as I referenced earlier, being in with the coaches and what they're identifying, what they value. you can see why they're all successful. And it starts to streamline the process as you're going through it. You're trying to collect, elite players, and that's ultimately what you're trying to do. We've had players in the captaincy roles, in the leadership roles that have led the right way. And we have a transition, and we're going through a transition with our current roster. I thought it would be a year earlier, to be perfectly honest with you, that we would go through some of the growing pains associated with that. We have to reestablish that. And that's not a one-step process. So going through the Four Nations and seeing all these great players on other teams that are in these roles, some are captains, some are just, leaders, and some are emerging leaders. It's exciting. It's exciting to try and take that blueprint and apply it to yours, and realizing that these are the best of the best. And I'll continue to do that. But, I was a sponge in the whole process.
But conceivably, as you're watching the great players who you're making decisions on who's going to be the final rosters to make Team Canada, you're also seeing some of their teammates and things that might also be about to be free agents, and an opportunity that you're seeing them in a way that you might be noticing them more because you're spending more time watching the teams that aren't your own or aren't team you're playing regularly.
Yeah, we're having conversations who complements players, and how those lines are put together and such. So, it's all instructional, it's all helpful as you're going through the same thing. You got to get the most competitive players you can. The one thing that stood out in the Four Nations in terms of when we were doing our debrief was how competitive and dialed in the players were. Obviously, the execution, the speed, the skill we all saw and marveled at. But how competitive and how driven they were to win and play the right way, you realize that's what translates. And our players that are going to lace up tonight in Providence have to hear the exact same message. They have to continue to develop that competitiveness that translates to winning hockey.